Hi, everyone, and welcome to Fresh from the Studio. Today, we've invited Maria Cristina Jadick, Erica Reed Lee, and Cristina White-Jones to present the new work that they've been creating. Two of the artists are based in Houston and one in Austin. Each artist will have 10 minutes to present, and you're welcome to put any comments or questions in the chat. We'll address them after the end of each of all three presentations. We're really thrilled to have these artist members share with us, and thank you for joining us. Let's get started with Erica Lee.
Hi, everyone. I'm just rolling up my presentation for you. Okay. Oh. Press the right button. Okay. Hi, everyone. I hope y'all can all hear me pretty well. I am, as Diane said, a Houston-based artist, and I've been working in Houston for most of my life as I was born here, but I did live in Austin briefly. So to get started, I am an artist interested in what the digital world's pervasiveness is doing to our idea of self, or what place is, and what that means in terms of how we connect with one another. I'm particularly interested in how this affects our memory. And so I've done a lot of different types of media to investigate this, but artist books have been a new area I've been exploring since the pandemic. So in mid-2020, I started taking classes from online classes from Center for the Book in New York and the San Francisco Center for the Book as well. And so I have two pieces from 2021 right here. One is Mount Yale in blue and the other Memory at a Distance. In both cases, I'm thinking about duration and place and how I can put this in an intimate form, a very tactile form as well, and hold on to it, perhaps like reclaim what my experiences and way of seeing the world which has been transitioning over to digital media most of my life. I've kind of experienced technology, and as I've grown up, all the new things that came out, particularly like the iPhone that came out in 8th grade. And having grown up with it, it's odd how I live both on my device and physically. So art making and the physical act of making it, both of those things are so essential to me. Anyways, so in Mount Yale, it's a meander format, and on each page you see a hiker moving forward to the mountains. And I liked using blue since blue is often associated with something distant and kind of harder to touch. And as you go through the pages, he moves forward, and then if you open it, somewhat like a map, an old school map that you have to open. It's very kind of odd and peculiar to open it up, but it gives you a personal experience with it. And then Memory at a Distance, I made it at the end of the summer of last year. And that was when I was really challenging myself not to be split between the online sphere and the physical places I was visiting. I really wanted to challenge myself to be present, and if there was any way of being there more so, having not had that experience, I guess, other than as a kid at this point. So in each of these panels, which are monoprinted, I do a scene from a place. And in this case, instead of blue, I use black because it kind of gives this feel of incomplete memory, I suppose. Yeah, I either use black or blue to work with that. Here's another book I used. This is an early artist book I did, and I'm not sure how well it's transitioned. You can see it, but it is a GIF, so it's a very low frame rate. And you'll see different panels of me going on a trip, and then on the back side is a abstract map connecting the traveling experience and moving from place to place. Okay, so beyond artist books, I'm also a painter. And during the pandemic, I was also experimenting with a color palette, specifically with red and blue. I was looking at the domestic space, the places I was in. So these are all scenes, these paintings became scenes of my home. And I was trying to make sense of things. And so pattern became really important. It played a role in all of these. And I was trying to mess with perspective a little, make it a little odd, as well as kind of playful and almost childlike and incomplete. So there's a lot of going back and forth with the white to make these scenes. And I chose red and blue to simplify things for myself because I was a little overwhelmed, as many of us were. And I found that they were opposites more so than anything else. So blue could be something that was, again, far away, something cold, perhaps something digital, so something manufactured, electric. And then red would be something immediate, something bodily, something of the earth, possibly. And so I explored this in several different paintings, and I'm still working with those two colors. I seem to keep finding things to play with there. Okay, and so a bigger project that I'm continuing to work off of is this performance piece, an installation I did with the funding from Houston Arts Alliance. And it was completely digital due to the pandemic. And it worked so that this, well, I'll get into it. But so in 2020, we were all experiencing connection and the world through our devices, our screens, and it was becoming filtered. And so I wanted to use the allegory of the cave, Plato's allegory of the cave, as a metaphor for our current experience. And so we were inside our homes, and the only pictures and images and like I said, connections are through our screens. And so I was interested in whether or not we would be able to leave this cave, our home, and interact with one another in a more physical sense. And so what I did is over 2 weeks, I painted at night and used, again, a very limited color palette, but instead of using the cadmium reds, I turned over to red oxide and burnt sienna, things that have traditionally been longstanding colors available to humans. I then, so painting at night, I kept it very dark and then only used the light emitted from my computer screens, my digital devices to paint, adding another layer, becoming my only like a way of seeing at this point, much like the torches, the fire torches people used during the prehistoric era. And I made this accessible to other people by doing Instagram live performances and occasionally as well. And you'll see here, another part of the process was doing the red and the very natural colors first, and then coming over with a layer of this electric blue, a phthalo blue. It's very, very bright, something I wasn't using in my previous paintings, and it almost shook me. I didn't really like it, but it works within the concept, and I thought the response I was having worked well with the idea. And so there's a photo of before, a little bit, there's a little bit of blue, but and after application of the blue. And so at the end, I did a walkthrough, and you can find this walkthrough on my Instagram page in the video section, the longer video section. And what I did was go around in the dark cave and used another phone to light as I went across the cave, as if you were there. So going forward, I'm now leaving the cave, so to say, so to speak. And I'm kind of titling it Here to There as a performance piece. I'm not quite sure. But I'm leaving Houston for a period of time and seeing how to compare what I experienced place as now, and particularly what home means in this context of always being able to connect back to Houston, or being able to connect with my friends and family that are here, and what that means to take a distance and the duration of time, how that works. And so I'm currently still making the plans for that, but I'm making a lot of work that is a little bit more aerial and playing with the red and blue still, and layering what I perceive as an element of digital technology, I suppose. And beyond that, I'm also working with the Artist Collective Open MFA for a show opening on May 6th, and I hope to see you there. It's all about artists working with new tactile crafts during the pandemic as a way of connecting with something physical, in hopes of connecting with reality in that way. And that's it.
Thank you so much.
Mhm. Yeah.
Next up, we'll have Cristina White-Jones.
Hi, I'm Cristina. I am here in Austin, specifically in Buda, but I've lived in Austin area my entire life. I am a mixed media painter, and specifically abstracts, I guess. I started doing these abstracts more, I guess, in college, and kind of have evolved since then. Before then, I've painted pretty much my entire life, and before then, I didn't really think about even considering abstracts until then. But I had two professors in college that kind of pushed me in that direction. I started using textures and things then as well. I have some pieces here in the background here that are kind of like in different stages. This green one I just recently started. It's kind of in the ugly phase, I guess. I generally start with so I guess what drew me to, let's go back to a little bit. I guess what drew me to abstracts and to the mixed media was, for me, it was more of like a challenge. I think a lot of people think that abstract work is easy, and it's just kind of like throwing down a bunch of things and not really thinking about it. And that's not the case at all. I mean, you have to have kind of a method to your madness, and you still have to think about composition and colors, and all of that has to go into play with what you're doing. And for me, it was a challenge. And a challenge is something that I've always liked. I've had to overcome a lot in my life with various health things, and so I think that's kind of what kept me going with it, and it's changed quite a bit over the years, especially with what the things that I use. My base is generally acrylics or house paints, sometimes spray paints, but generally acrylic. I don't know if I'm able to share. I didn't do I should have done a little thing, but generally I start out. So on here, generally I start out by laying down texture, or if I'm having trouble thinking, then I'll make a bunch of marks on the canvas. But generally I start with whatever texture that I want to use. I like to try to use things that I can, repurpose or recycle. Like I like to use, this is a citrus bag. So if I find something that might be interesting to use, I have this whole pile of things here on my work table here, of stuff that I kind of pile up and use. And some things work and some things don't. Some fabrics are really, really complicated to use, and end up using a lot of paint. But I'll lay down the texture first, whatever material that is, and sometimes it's multiple materials, and then layer on paints, and then maybe more materials, and then I'll go back in maybe with pastels or spray paint or something like that. This piece, which I don't know if y'all can see the whole thing here. No, y'all can't see it, but there, I bent it down a little bit. So that one is a completed piece. It's kind of a finished piece. So I usually go back in with oil pastels and things. So movement is really important. The texture is really important. I am, like I said, it's a challenge for me. And I like a challenge. I think that it goes back to not only overcoming the health things that I've had to overcome, but overcoming things in life. I mean, I'm a mother, so there's challenges that go along with that for those of us that are mothers. But I feel like I like to say like that the texture in my work represents the kind of like the bumps and the bruises that I've had to kind of endure to kind of get to where I am, today. But and then by creating that movement in the pieces, I don't have any anything specifically that I'm working on currently. Right now I'm working on a lot of commission work, so I don't have any shows that I'm currently working specifically on right now. I'm doing a lot of commissions right now, so that's been taking up a lot of my time, but that's what I've got.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next up we have Cristina Maria Jadick.
This is my studio. Welcome. Thanks for your interest in seeing some of my art. Because most of my work is on the wall in an exhibition, I'm going to take you to a video that I made of a walkthrough of the gallery. So I'm going to play that now. I'm Christy Jadick, also known as Maria Cristina Jadick, and we're here at the G-Spot Contemporary Art Gallery in Houston, Texas, at my solo exhibition called Into Resilience. Texas. This exhibition looks at the effects of Hurricane Harvey and its aftermath through the lens of bayous and neighborhoods, largely based on original digital photographs that I took about 2 weeks after Hurricane Harvey. The work you're looking at now is called Aftermath, and it's one of several paintings that I did. It was painted with acrylic paint and was interlaced with hand stitching, machine sewing, and embroidery to augment the 3D feel of the mangled, tangled vines and tree limbs after the hurricane. This painting is called Bayou Aftermath, and it's done in acrylic paint on canvas. There was an original digital photograph that was a basis for it. In addition, I collected during my walks along the bayou in the Hurricane Harvey aftermath debris in the form of vines, shorn pieces of wood, and bits of plastic that were ravaged in the flood. I like to think of these bits of plastic as Hurricane Harvey flags, because inevitably they would get caught on high limbs or branches and flagging the height to where the water rose. But they also comment as well on some of the causal factors of climate change, which is the petrochemical carbon production, and it also alludes to consumerism, where we demand these products, and a lot of it is plastic-based, which can be harmful to our environment. So it's a call for us to be mindful and to reduce our consumption and perhaps refuse to consume, or at the very least, recycle. In the background, there on the main wall, you can see 4 original digital photo prints that are highly contrasted and sepia toned, and then they're laser printed on paper, and also another painting that I made, and this one's called Bayou Into Resilience, and it was made on the basis of a photo I had taken of the Buffalo Bayou after Hurricane Harvey flooding. I had sewn and integrated some found wood and vines into the painting in accordance with the type of foliage in the image itself. And some of the wood and the vines were pretty mangled and served as an exclamation point to the event that happened. And as you look at the painting, you can see the tannish silt that pushes out into the landscape. And that's an indication, too, of how far the flood waters got deep into the neighborhoods. But even so, the bayou systems are in the process of recovery, even though they suffered hugely from the event. Here is another digital photo that was sepia toned and highly contrasted, and the bayou image is still appealing and attractive despite the bedraggled, silty covered bayou banks. It was taken at a roadside, and you can see the debris at the top of the road, and it also marks how high the floodwaters came. These photographs that show the bayou echoes, as I like to call them, where you perhaps take a pebble and you throw it into the water, watching the ripples, and you can see reflections of the trees and sky in the water on a beautiful day as you walk along the river, and it's probably the most Pacific part of a bayou experience. And it calls to mind those wonderful times of relaxation and contemplation. And these are preludes to what happened. It's also the quiet place we want to get to after such a traumatic event. These are original digital photo gel medium transfers of the most devastated neighborhoods post-Harvey that I visited, where I went to try and help a friend of mine who'd been flooded for the 4th time, and she was totally traumatized. I was shocked when I saw the extent of the devastation that happened to this neighborhood. House after house, street after street, with the contents of flooded homes put on the street to be hauled away. I didn't do anything with the original color photos I had taken. I didn't want anyone to be upset, but I felt that they needed to be documented. And in the end, I went back to the neighborhood a couple of times over the last few years, and I saw the dramatic change where people had done all they could to overcome the tragedy. They rebuilt, and they rebuilt more sustainably and with the hope of a more resilient future. And I was overcome with this sense of indomitable human spirit. It was so admirable and remarkable, and I felt that it was something that we could take away maybe as a lesson, how we can handle our own futures with whatever we have to face. This work is called Deluge, More to Come, ? It's ambiguous. It could be read as stormy waters or stormy skies, and it's next to this work called Call for a New Day that almost looks like an old-fashioned Texas postcard, save for the pile of Harvey debris in front of it. And in the sky, instead of blue sky, we have collaged all the newspaper headlines highlighting the traumatic episodes of the Harvey event and the post-Harvey event, including the air pollution, which was a year's worth of pollution released in 2 weeks, and the toxic chemicals that spilled in the waterways from petrochemical plants during the storm, and people were exposed to all of it. And then, of course, unfair development practices where homes were built in floodways and unsuspecting homeowners bought these homes and were flooded. So there's a lot that we need to do to make things better and to avert tragedies and keep them from reoccurring going forward. This work is called Disaster into Resilience, and these images of dining room chairs and books are very intimate and personal, almost serving as a metaphor for a family, in my view. But again, as an emblem to me of recovery, where they're putting it out and starting over again, and it's an emblem of a first step toward what they had achieved, which was starting their new life again, starting better, more efficiently, and more environmentally prepared for what could happen again. And they say inevitably these kinds of events could happen again, or worse. Hurricane Harvey was a 1,000-year event, and we need to be prepared. And this work is called Reclaiming Normalcy. So this is G Contemporary Art Gallery in Houston, just to reiterate. And again over here, these are some more images of flooded Houston neighborhoods. Original digital photos that were laser printed and then gel medium transferred to Reeves BFK paper. I hand colored certain sections with colored pencils and acrylic paint, and I highlighted certain aspects of the image. In this case, the rear view mirror of my car, my SUV. The photo shows contents of one home, but the rear view mirror shows more of the same going deep into the neighborhood. And I sat there quietly taking pictures in disbelief. This work is called In the Rear View, and it alludes to the hope that the trauma is behind them and that they are better prepared to handle what's coming in the future. This is called Storm Waters, and it placed where it is, it puts the images of neighborhood flooding next to it in context. This piece is called Resilience. It's a lone chair, a metaphor, again, maybe for a person. It's so personal, you can imagine how a person had often sat comfortably in it, relaxing, reading a book, maybe enjoying a beverage. And now it's in the front sidewalk waiting to be hauled away. So, over here is another painting. It's about 5 foot by 4 foot, and it's a Buffalo Bayou photo based in the Harvey Aftermath. I found some wood vines and leaves and some wood that I attached to the painting with waxed string. And I was trying to integrate the natural world that was part of the actual event itself into this artificial evocation of the painting, of the event. So it's got lots and lots of layers of acrylic paint, very highly textured. some leaves. I gel medium those so they would be resistant. Again, Maria Cristina Jadick, Into Resilience. And this exhibition opened on April 2nd. And G Gallery is on 223 East 11th Street in Houston, in the Heights. Wayne Gilbert is the gallery owner, and he can be reached on his cell 713-822-4842 if you want to visit the gallery anytime. Gallery hours are usually open Saturdays from noon to 5. And this exhibition will be on view through the end of April. Thank you for your interest. Okay.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank you all so much for sharing. It was so great to see all of your different works in progress and kind of what got you to the point that you're at now with all of your work. Something I found really interesting is all of you are kind of responding to these different things in your life, the textures that Cristina was responding to in her painting, Maria's responding to these photographs, and then Erica, the light from the digital devices in your house kind of becoming a allegory for this cave, and working with that digital light I thought was really interesting. I want to go ahead and open up the floor to any questions that anyone may have in the audience. Feel free to just unmute yourself and ask them, or you can type them into the chat and I can ask them for you. Also, if the artists have any questions, feel free to ask one another. If no one has any questions to start, I had a question for you, Erica. A lot of your work made me think about first just seeing the drawings, this sequential art, even in the book form. It's not this stagnant thing. It feels almost like an animation. I was wondering if you've ever thought about pursuing that and working with these drawings in sort of a sequential digital environment.
Yeah, I have thought about it. I haven't gotten too much into it yet, but William Kentridge is a great influence for me. And so I've done a lot of paintings or drawings where I draw it and then one scene and then erase it all or erase components of it and then take photos as I go. And I did that with sound once before, and I'm really thinking about incorporating sound at some point. But I haven't done too much of it. It's something that I'm still interested in. And I might do something with the new work I have coming up where I will have an installation just like I did before and then project an animation component onto it. But yeah, it's something in the future.
Yeah, that sounds like it would be a great addition to your work. So we had a comment in the chat here for Maria Cristina. Your work is so moving. I was wondering, what is the significance of the two photographs with the inverted image? For example, the mirrored image of the stop sign.
Right. I had thought about doing it right side, and I just thought, it would be much more effective if I did it reverse, because it just sort of alludes to the whole chaotic upside down nature of what happened. And I was also thinking about if I were to have just shown the photographs as they were as photographs, I think what you get from looking at them is more about trauma and documentary, as opposed to going in after the fact and altering them in a way where you just highlight certain things with using brightly colors to use it as a way to evoke recovery, overcoming the trauma. So that was the significance of that. And it was just those were examples of the entire neighborhood, house after house, block after block. I was just shocked. But I felt really great over time, just seeing how wonderfully the neighborhood came back and the people banded together and they just, rebuilt and rebuilt better, smarter. And, they seem to really move forward in a really healthy way. So.
Yeah, I think your use of the color really, highlights the people in these places. The use of using the debris, it almost feels like a portrait of the people that are living in these homes that you're photographing. We got another question in the chat for you. Christy, you picked all the vines and debris in this work right after Harvey. Did you already have in mind the work that you would be doing at the time? Or initially, was it just keeping record of that event?
To be honest with you, it was record keeping, but I knew I was going to do something. I just didn't know what. And I think my feeling after Harvey was just overwhelmed. I had to process it for a while. So it took a couple of years before I would really go back to it and then think about, okay, do I want to use this and how will I use it? But the debris definitely was sort of stacked in my studio. I have some more debris, big limbs that I'm thinking about doing a big installation having to do with the flooding waters. And I was thinking about perhaps using bits of plastic and some air movement that makes it look like it's actually being carried in space. So it's stuff that I've been thinking about over time.
Thank you. Yeah, that got me thinking also about Cristina, your work with kind of collecting this debris and things that you use as texture in your paintings, even though they don't show through, it's kind of the opposite. They're kind of like hidden within, but it seems like you respond to them. Could you talk a little bit about how you respond to these things, or maybe, what kind of prompts you to collect this item and put it into a painting?
I think it's the way they feel. And like I said, some things work and some things don't. I really like using these citrus bags. I think it's because I can pull, and I should have gotten, I don't know if y'all can see, there's a white piece that's up there and it has lots and lots. It has several different things on it, but I use the citrus bag on it. But I think it's because you can kind of pull it apart, and it takes a lot if I am going to cover it up and not let it, I've let it show through on a couple different pieces because I like the color of it. But I think it's because I can rip it apart. But I think it's the feel of it, the same like when I've used burlaps and different fabrics like that. I think there's just some things that kind of jump out at me. I just finished a piece with, this is something I'm never going to use again ever in my life. Like this was a remnant piece that I found or somebody gave me, and I just finished a piece that's in a gallery in Austin, and I don't think I'll ever use this material ever again. And again, it was a challenge, and I said I like a challenge, but this stuff took so much to just get. I really love to, I want things, I love to see the paints, like the strokes, but I want to have a certain blend to create that movement in my work at the same time. And I don't know, this stuff just was giving me the hardest time. And so there's just, I don't know, there's some stuff that works and some stuff that doesn't. I really love tissue paper and newspaper. I always say it was terrible. Like, in college, you have to take at least one ceramics or sculpture class. And I was terrible at sculpture. But I love sculpting on a canvas. And newspaper is awesome because it's like I have my spray bottle and you can kind of move it around with the paintbrush, but don't give me clay or anything like that because I'm terrible at anything like that. So I think it's just, it's the feel of something, I guess. If it has a certain feel about it, then I'll see what I can do with it.
That makes sense. Your paintings look kind of tactile, and you can tell that sort of that texture is really important to
Yeah.
your work. We had another question in the chat here for Christy. When I first saw the title of your show, I thought it was about isolation of the pandemic experience. How do you see the relationship between these two events? Resilience is certainly a key response.
I think it's intertwined, because to be honest with you, I don't know how the other artists felt during COVID, but for the first year, I couldn't make work. I was just thinking about trying to stay safe and stay healthy, and I just sort of stopped. And then the following year, I started revisiting, up to the studio and revisiting and going back to it. So resilience was key in my mind, because it was something I was trying to actually live and figure out ways to just have a different new normal life. And I felt kinship with these people who were recovering post Harvey, because it's the same process. I mean, the trauma that they experienced is completely different, but trying to overcome their circumstances is something that evokes being resilient. And yes, I agree with what Madeline was saying about that. To be honest with you, I didn't go out of the studio. I was pretty much in hibernation for pretty much 2 years. And, I have multiple comorbidities. So I knew that if I was sick, I would probably not have a very good outcome. So I was hibernating. And that's probably why I was doing the kind of work that I did for this exhibition that I just showed you. But it's a symbiotic relationship between overcoming COVID isolation and having to refigure your entire life when everything is just turned upside down and you don't know what to do next.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And you can tell, maybe being in your studio allowed you to kind of play around with some of these things, past trauma that you're dealing with during all of this, which is the hurricane. And I think it makes me think about, Erica, too, your work thinking about this isolation and creating work around it. And is the cave in your home? Is that in your home, or is it at a different location?
It was.
Okay.
I put up a whole bunch of canvas and was working inside the home, and it was the entryway. It's a weird house layout, but it's a very large area. So yeah, those are currently rolled up.
Did you have that in mind from the very beginning, or was that a response to COVID?
That was a response to COVID. So I did that in April, or I did the initial writing for that in April 2021. And then I did the performance in September of 2021. The paintings and the artist books were much more during the 2020 era, and like the larger paintings of red and blue, like this one behind me right here. That was having to do a lot with isolation more so. Like I really thought of the wood paneling and using that to go around as kind of like a fire, or and using the brush strokes, and was that part of my painting process became a way of activating my body and becoming something human, because I was so caught up in being so little in my screen or something like that.
So when you did that performance on the Instagram Live, did people kind of interact with you? Because it made me think about, you were talking about this as, the way that people interact was digitally and it felt kind of separated. Was that maybe a way of bringing people into your space, and how did people respond to that?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting, this idea or this concern, and then using the platforms that I'm talking about as my medium. But I like the idea of that mediating my artwork in them. And so I didn't have too much interaction as I was painting, but being on display and being aware of that, that was really an interesting thing, like watching that, observing that for myself. That will probably influence future work, as that was that idea of always being on, or like the branding kind of ideas where you're self-branding or curating yourself. So that live nature was really interesting. Knowing that people were watching. I did more interaction when I did the walkthrough, since I wasn't painting at the same time.
I was also wondering a little bit about the actual like content of what you were drawing. I thought it was interesting that you're using digital light to see, and you're painting would seem like a park or like a natural kind of landscape.
Yeah, so there were abstracted somewhat scenes of my day-to-day. And so I first started off, I tried to be very organic about the process of like something immediate of what I considered what was inside my head, essentially. And so the first one was being on my phone in my bed, just in that domestic space, and all of the different screens and platforms I was accessing. And then I moved forward in that larger panel to something more outward. And so you have the Zoom somewhat display and a camera at the top, and then you have different scenes. So walking around in the neighborhood kind of constantly, I was doing so many walks. And then looking at my home outside and going into that. And then we have the Capitol and the component of 2021 and what happened then, and the politics associated with that was filtered through only news outlets. Like there's just so much that's being translated and not knowing what's going on. And then you have the third panel, and that takes an aerial view. So I was kind of, that's where I've been playing off of, I suppose, a more outward way of looking in.
Does anyone else have any further questions in the audience? Feel free, I'll ask them for you, or you can just unmute yourself and ask any final questions here.
Well, I had a question for the other artists about, we were talking about trauma a little bit, and I've been playing with this idea of it being in the body and kind of engaging with that. And I was wondering if either of y'all had been playing with your personal body and like thinking about trauma inside, and incorporating that.
Oh, for sure. I think I kind of froze up whenever I was talking, and I apologize. My brother is ill right now, and he has cancer, and I got a text message while I was talking, and so I apologize. My work definitely relates to I have chronic pain, and I have had many surgeries on my hip and leg, and so I deal with a lot of that. I think that's what comes out in my work. That's how I deal with a lot of things like on a day-to-day. So I think for sure, I think that's I think without it, I don't know that I would be able to really survive. So that's really my main outlets. And I think that depending kind of on my mood is not necessarily maybe like color choices, but maybe even like the flow of how something is going to go, like, or the way I'm going to lay something down, or even like the softness of the or the relief, I guess, of what's going to be on the canvas. Like if it's going to be tissue paper, it's going to be a little softer. I don't know if that makes sense, but definitely I think that's how I've been dealing since childhood with this. So I definitely think that I deal with my various traumas that way. So anyway.
Mhm.
admirable that you overcome and that you show such resilience despite, these physical feelings that, impact your ability or willingness to do things. I know that, during COVID, just feeling not 100% and, I'm worried about things. It impacted my ability to make work. So
Yeah.
hats off to you, really.
Yeah.
That's remarkable.
I
You know,
think
and
that was the one time. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that was the one time I felt the same. I didn't create, I think I created maybe one, maybe 2 or 3 pieces that entire year. And I didn't create my first piece maybe until like I don't know, May of that year, or maybe I created like in June and then stopped until May or something. I don't know. And that's not like me at all, but I just felt like, like what's happening here. I didn't know what was going on. So it was just a weird place to be. So
it's in answer to Eric, I understand what you're saying. And again, just hats off to you. And Erica, as far as the body is concerned, I never think of it just in terms of my own physical body, but more like a response to what's happening in the world.
Mm.
And when it comes to hurricanes, I mean, I'm viscerally affected whenever it rains because I live next to a bayou. So as I see the water going up, it's like, okay, when are we leaving? It's just gotten to that point, sort of a thing. But as far as future work is concerned, I'm thinking about looking into marginalized communities, Hispanic communities in Houston that have been terribly affected and they don't have the wherewithal to recover. So, and looking at it in the body, cultural body in that sense.
Yeah. I like the idea of reaching out. We're kind of moving on to our communities again and trying to figure things out, make connections, and see how each of one of us are doing.
Exactly. Hopefully we can do that. Fingers crossed that we're at that point now.
Yeah.
Quick question. What were you going to do with that project had you not done it in your house?
Like, would I find a venue, that kind of thing?
I mean, was it going to be the same project, only not in your house, somewhere else, or would it have been substantially different? Had you?
I mean, I crafted it with the space in mind, like they kind of work together. I guess I would look for a different house. A good venue might be like Flatland Gallery, where I'll be curating that show, because that's a house structure, or any other kind of galleries that are like that. It was I was hoping at one point to, depending on the numbers, COVID numbers, to have people come in and experience it themselves. So at night, and use their own phones to look at it. But I got a little antsy about it, one, COVID, and two, just having strangers in such an intimate place.
Totally understand that. I like the idea though. I think that would have been really interesting.
Well, I want to go ahead and thank you all so much for sharing and talking about so personally how this work has affected you all and like what you're doing with it going forward. And I really hope to follow what you're doing in the work now. Erica, I'm excited to see about the aerial work. Maria, I'm excited to see you keep exploring these other communities and really kind of reach out that way, because I think the work already has that in it. So I think it's going to be exciting to see how that goes forward. And same with you, Cristina, really working with these textures and the feelings that you're dealing with physically and allowing that to kind of appear on the canvas. So thank you all again for talking with us today. And thanks for the audience for being here. I wanted to share a couple of things that we have coming up at Women in Their Work. Right now in the gallery, we have Deluminations or Words to Live by Alexandra Robinson that you can come visit during our normal hours. We're going to have a reception for the exhibition on April 30th from 6 to 8 p.m. And the artist will be here so you can hear a little bit more about the work from her and explore the gallery and have a refreshment. And then we have another edition of Fresh from the Studio coming up in May that we will announce soon. So keep an eye out for that. And then we'll also have the talk about related to Alexandra Robinson's exhibition coming up on May 21st. And so keep following us for more events. There'll be a lot of other stuff coming up as well. And once again, thank you all for being here and sharing your work with us today.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank